as we started this wonderful engagement. My name is Tembi Sonjangase. I'm the Managing Director of Sobeto Consulting. I'm quite excited to have an opportunity to host our first live webinar where we'll be engaging and discussing on fundamental issues that perhaps can benefit us in our organizations. Our guest speaker for today is Mr. Delani Mtembu. Hi, Delani, how are you?
Hello, Stembiso. I'm well. Greetings to everyone.
Great stuff. So I've put everyone on mute. Everyone will remain on mute until we are done with the formal presentation, and then we're going to allow people to engage by virtue of asking questions. We've got an opportunity or facility to raise a hand, and then we'll be able to engage on that. Overall, our engagement should take us about an hour. Delani, thank you very much for making time, and looking forward to share the stage with you in terms of you sharing your knowledge and insight on the topic of the role of leadership in dealing with change. As we know, change is a constant feature in our organizations. So once again, this platform allows us to engage and discuss this phenomenon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nchangase, and thank you very much to everyone who is connected. And I see a familiar face there, a young lady, I think she's in Cape Town, Sanema. And I'm not trying to be discriminatory, but acknowledging somebody that I see there. I'll take you through my slides, which is simple, my expression of my experience. I'm not trying to show that I'm a master or anything around change. We all struggle with it. As you saw, technology is part of us now, and we are all learning. And I'm on the learning curve. But I've chosen that the title that was already up as part of this session to just remind you that I've added few things on the title if you look at the slide. I've added a word exception deliberately, and I've also added a word emerging, and then I've added a word transition as part of change. So I want to keep those in your mind. Leadership has to be exceptional, not just leadership. And also leadership has to embed itself in emerging realities. And when I say emerging realities, I'm talking about things that you don't plan, they were not part of your strategy, they were not part of your projection. It's things that just come up, pop up in your life. I've added a word transition because I am challenging our use of the word change. And I will share why later on the slides. So we shouldn't just talk about change, but we should also talk about transition and transformation when we talk about change. But you'll get more details as you move on. The first slide, I'm just sharing an overview of what I'm going to present. So even if you forget anything I say, if you remember this slide, you would have got the gist of what I'm sharing. I'm saying as we lead organizations or as we lead ourselves, even if we think we are not leading organizations, we should accept that life and context where we work is complex and constantly emerges. And I've just given few examples. Some are local, some are international. Nobody had planned that in 2008 there will be a financial crisis. Nobody planned that in 2010 there would have been an Arab Spring. Nobody planned that there would have been fees must fall. And nobody planned the Brexit. And I would assume that in South Africa, we didn't plan corruption, we didn't plan the breakdown of governance or the breakdown of leadership or the breakdown of systems in our government. We will also argue that in the world, there is a great emerging lack of winning of political parties. And therefore, there is a growing coalition governments that are coming on board. And then lastly, we are now locked down. I'm in my house, you are in your place of stay, and we are locked down by coronavirus. We didn't plan it. So emergence is part of our lives. The second thing is that leaders, if they want to be exceptional and they want to be effective, leaders must learn to answer the question, what is your source of your existence? How would you describe why you exist? How would you describe what informs you to engage with people, to lead your organization, or to be part of your friends, and to deal with issues of economic fall, educational failures, leadership bankruptcy, bankruptcy of skills, challenges of attitudes, absence of soul. And I will explain these things as we move on, and what I call the irony of presence. I'm saying the irony of presence just lately because all of us are present. We all here. But many of us are present, but not present in our minds, not present in our souls, not present in our feelings, and not present in our knowing. And that is why I'm saying there is also an irony of presence. Let's not assume that everybody who is present is present. The third thing is that we should live with the pain of learning to being. We are constantly being molded in life, becoming, and that is the process. We grow. We may grow by age, but we don't grow by knowledge or by skill or by insight. So we are in constant being built as human beings. And that is why I'm saying that's a pain of being, that's a pain of becoming. Understanding transformation, transition, change, but also realizing that as all these things happen, we face hidden and subtle resistance. People say, I don't like this, I don't like you, you are my friend, you are not my friend. And that is part of life. The fourth thing is the impact of all these things in life and in business, in organizations. Generally, we get unemployment as the country is struggling. We get stubborn poverty as we understand it, inequality, poor quality of education, economic collapse, failure of quality of our services, and dynamics of changing workplaces, and our unworkable electoral system, which the world is facing at the moment. That's the impact of complexity. That's the impact of not understanding our source of being. That's the impact of not living, understanding the journey of becoming and being. And lastly, I am saying today, we must find a solution that is not talking about now. Because the now has happened, and the now may be informed by my past, but I'm talking about the solution that maps the future that is emerging, a solution that will be authentic and truthful, ethical, principled, and also capture the lovely word we use, Ubuntu mindset, which is about being purposeful, being inclusive, being loving, being transparent, being open, being accommodative, but also growing other people around you. And that is why I'm saying being responsible. Now let's begin, having given you the overview. And I'm beginning with this map. I love this map. And this map tells you where you are. And I'm sure you can see where you are. But the map is upside down. It just shows that the world we are living in is not the world I lived in when I was younger. It's not the world I'm living in even now as I get much more matured. It's a world that changes all the time. And that is why it's upside down. And as the world changes, it challenges what I call assumptions. We all have assumptions of what the world is, what friends are, what organizations are. And I'm arguing that the world is forcing us, like the corona that has forced us now to be on webinar. The world is forcing us to understand that people we lead and people we are friends with and people even the ones we hate are inherently capable, and they by their nature aspire for greatness and have the ability to choose. I don't choose for them. I can't panel beat them if the world is fine or shape them to what I want to be. At the bottom of their being, people make choices. And if you want to read more about that, you can look at Otto Scharmer and Bridges, David Bridges, books that talk about emergent leadership. The second thing is that human beings are not animals. Human beings live by principles. And principles are timeless. And that is why I'm not using the word values, because values are personal. Why these times when we are locked down, we see people fighting for food. It's because there is a contradiction of values and personalities and the choices that people want to make. But principles are out there embracing everybody's culture, background, size, age, and preferences. And the one leader who talks about this is my mentor, Stephen Covey, the late, and Shelton that I've also given there. And another mentor of mine that I've not engaged with recently is Zubabu Ruel Koza, who wrote a book about attuned leadership. All these people are talking about the value of principles, the importance of principles. Something like love is a principle. Whether you are a criminal or whether you are a sweeper, you understand what love is about. So I'm saying, as leaders, let's understand the power of principles, which leads to the third bullet point, which is about choice. And with choice also adds something around energy and trust. And if you want to read more, you can look at a yearly report that is presented every year by Elderman that produces reports on trust. The fourth factor is that human beings by nature are collaborative people. We like to work interdependence. We work with others. We associate with others. We create relationships. Some fall and some grow and some are sustained. And then lastly, all human beings by nature aspire for superior performance. If this is what assumptions are about human beings, you will realize how easy it is to lead a human being. If you engage me during questions and answers, you will tell me how easy it can be to lead a human being, but also how complex it can become. But it becomes complex if we fail to acknowledge these assumptions that I've shared there. I'm not talking about these people. I'm just sharing a picture that these are people that we all remember in our minds. Some we don't know and some we have met. I'm choosing these people because I don't want to use the current leaders we have, because you may blame me for being either supportive of this color or that color. I'm putting this because they are all late, and we all remember how they led their countries and how we loved them. By the way, not all of them, I can still see their KK, I think is still alive, if I'm correct. Why do we remember these leaders? We remembered them because they cherished the assumptions that we have just put there. Here is another important picture. You have a very combination that is hard to find. You have Madiba there, and you have Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali. You also have Steve Biko and Patrice Lumumba. All these leaders, you can choose which one you like, and you can write him down so that during the question and answers, you can question me about them. But any of these represent what you like and what you choose, and they've left an imprint in your mind of what leadership is about. Let's move on. This is an important quotation by Sharma, which I want you to reflect on, that confirms how the world has become. And he says, we lived in an era of intense conflict and massive institutional failures, a time of painful ending and a time of hopeful beginnings. He says it's a time that feels as if so much is crumbling and something profound is shifting and dying, while something else wants to be born. Now, that's the reality of our lives. So the corona has come, challenges have come, many challenges I've mentioned have come, but for me, they all come for something to be born. Therefore, what are the emerging challenges that leaders are facing? But challenges come also with opportunities. Leaders are facing challenges that are about failure, that sometimes you do something and you don't see the results. You engage with someone, you don't see the connection. Sometimes we get stuck into the world of now and we don't move on. Sometimes we constantly witness other leaders, not just ourselves, making decisions that show failure, whether they're in civil society, or whether they're in private sector, or whether they're in public. All leaders fail. But I'm saying it's because we don't recognize what recently Forbes magazine has said through the writer I've reflected there. And she argues that global powers shifts are taking place. There is war now between America, Russia, Germany, China, the Middle East. We can't just take this for granted. These are powers that are shifting. And as these shifts happen, they affect us in our organizations. They affect us in our families as we are where we are today. But also, things are happening with speed, and technology and automation is with us, and it impacts our organizations. It challenges our business. And as automation comes, it changes what Stembiso would know, as he is a guru on human resources. It challenges how we contract each other. It challenges how we work and where we work. It challenges how we move around. And that is why it challenges traveling. And technology comes again, it challenges culture. So today, beyond the coronavirus lockdown, we need to think about these things and how we work differently. And also she says that today we will be focusing more on health, on education, on work culture, on social matters, philanthropy, and on environment. And that is why, as you will see now in the Middle East or in the places like Dubai and others, they are now talking about e-service and e-government. And I hope that our government very soon will move that direction so that we deal with speed. And in all this, trust becomes a factor. Therefore, leadership, I argue that leadership has nothing to do with your position you hold, has nothing to do with the pay you get, has nothing to do with the car you drive. Leadership is about influence. And influence is a choice that people make whether they follow you or they don't follow you. Our leaders today need to understand that that is where they are. They must earn leadership. They cannot command it. If that is the case, therefore, how do they lead? And I'm deliberately saying in the African context because that's where we are. And I'm saying we need to create new ways of competition and new ways of driving quality. And we better wake up and understand that competition and quality requires ownership culture from the people we work with and from the people we lead. And that is why, whether we hate China or not, whether we agree with their own framework of how they lead, they build ownership and a commitment of patriotism that drives their people. We also need to understand that partnership is key, whether you're in the private sector or in the public sector. We must create partnerships. And that is why I work with Sobeto and I drive and I still work with Delani M International. The public sector at the same time is strained by lack of growth, by many things like commodity prices and poor leadership. And a lot of emerging voices are coming up, both in our organizations, but also in the politics of our times. The emerging voices I'm talking about is NGOs or civil societies that are coming, or different formations that are happening. Some of them that do not have any structure, but they are just fluid and constantly organizing themselves around issues, and they challenge us. So if you lead an organization today, you may not be facing a union, but you may be facing a revolt from a group of people that have come together through a WhatsApp or through email or through webinar as we are today and organize themselves against you. So you can't take them to court because they are not a structure. They are not a movement. They are just loose. So these are challenges that we face today. But we also need to understand that we need to embrace our own weaknesses and embrace our own frailty and embrace of what I call our own blind spots. Because when we embrace these things, that is the beginning of growth. That is the beginning of transformation. And lastly, we must have a presence of mind, a presence of heart, and a presence of thought, and a presence of emotions. A presence that is internal, so that we are able to lead other people external to where we are. Therefore, what does this mean? It takes us back to the old adage that we also understand. Leadership is about making people lead themselves, living with the people, understand where they are, and understand how they pain and what makes them tick. And that is what we see today, that as we are locked down, our government and our leaders are struggling to understand who we are and where we are and what we want. In other words, leadership is about inspiration. Leadership is about radical change. Leadership is about transitional attitude and changing of behavior. Transition, the difference with transition and change in my literature is that change is about external input or stimulus, but transition is about internal, inside out stimulus. It's about me making my choice to change. But change is about my context, my environment forcing me to change, as the coronavirus has forced us to stay in our houses. But while we stay in our houses, transition will help us to design new forms of work, new forms of platform, and new forms of managing relationship. And the other thing is that we must live and understand pain and live with hope. We must have a strong culture of working together, sharing common vision, and also sharing ownership. We must have a sense of connection and a sense of partnership, and we must have an uncompromising commitment to organizational quality of service, discipline, and high level of accountability. I want to emphasize that. We must have an uncompromising commitment, a commitment that doesn't give us a leeway to bend or change, but a commitment that says quality is quality, service is service, discipline is discipline, and accountability is accountability. Let's move on. Then what is the inquiry and what is our source of calling? I'm arguing that, as Einstein put it, problems that we have are our own creation, and they can be solved, but not by the level at which we were when we created them. We can solve our problems when we lift up our level of consciousness to a level of newness, when we look into the future and we don't look back into the past, nor do we look back into the present. And I'm saying this with pain because I'm not that young, and I'm still highly learning, and even learning to my granddaughter. And that is the pain of understanding the future. And that calls for us to be able to be effective and efficient. It calls us to understand influence and control. It calls us to understand that we are whole human beings, body, mind, soul, and heart. It also forces us to understand that our behavior is informed by our thoughts and our sense of existence. And therefore, if we want to change our behavior, we must work with our personalities, with our character, and with our competence. It also calls us to understand what my friend in the States, when he did his PhD, he did a PhD on what he calls results. Roy Whitten says results are about attitude, competence, and effort. It also calls for us to understand the power of delegation and empowerment, what Bonang Mohale, Professor Mohale, calls in his book, Lift Somebody, Lift as You Rise. And that is about delegation and empowerment. It also requires us to define the need and not to take something off the shelf and feed it to the person, but to engage the person and understand what is the need. And that is where many organizations struggle. That's where many governments struggle, because they just pluck the solution to what they think is the need. The other thing is that we must understand that there is a need for us to build capability for the future, not for now. Capability for the future rests on a power of mandate, reason, and source, and soul. It rests on the power of science, politics, and intuition, which Douglas Board talks about. It rests on the power of seeing, power of doing, and the power of receiving, which is what Stephen Covey talks about, and also rests on what Inspirational Development Group talks about, the power of partnerships, followership, and the power of leadership. These are powers of building future capability to solve our problem. And they come with pain, and they come with impact. They come with a challenge for us to constantly question, to inquire, and to understand and accept our own blindness, to understand, to manage our disconnect, but also to live in building a capability for execution, which Rem Shiran talks about in his book about the power of execution. It calls for us to understand that leadership is about legitimacy. You don't force yourself, but leadership is stewardship. Stewardship is informed by misuse, or not by misuse, by understanding of your source or of your mandate. And then lastly, it's about responsiveness, investing to people, investing to research and development, investing to small businesses, and investing to the key powers of our economy. Lastly, in this section, it also calls for us to ask the questions not just about the what and how, but about the why. Constantly ask, why am I doing this? Why am I assuming this? Why am I involved? And as we ask the question of why, we get closer to the source, to our spirit and to our soul, which brings commitment, which brings passion, which brings energy. Therefore, how do we move leaders to make people go to where they want to go? As the lady says here, the former First Lady, leaders take people where they don't just want to go, but where they don't necessarily want to go. Leaders, in other words, are able to provide solutions. And that is my last part of my slides. Leaders are able to provide solutions that are sustainable, solutions that are authentic, solutions that have got agility, solutions that are responsive, solutions, as my friend, whom I think is here, Dr. Dumisani Magadlela, I'm sure he's part of us. He talks a lot about Ubuntu mindset, but also solutions that encourage habits of the heart, not habits of behavior, habits of passion, habits of energy, and habits of relationships. Leaders must also re-envision or revision. When you revision, you must have a sense of seeing the invisible. You must have a sense to inspire. You must have a sense to enable a polished smile. I normally say to leaders, and some of you here know that I see their faces. I normally say every leader has a smell. Every leader creates a smile. Every leader compounds energy. Every leader makes people to make choices. And every leader is able to transform attitudes. Attitudes transform words, and words transform behavior, and behavior builds character. And Ramsh Shiran talks about a very simple thing which I love to share. That leaders must be able to create clarity of purpose. They must also be able to create commitment to the purpose, but they must also be able to build capacity to translate purpose and commitment into action. If you look at the first three, you will see that the first three bullet points are about persons, us. Are you clear about who you are and what you do? Are you committed to what you do? Are you able to have the skill and the tools to translate what you do into action? The last three are about organizations that we either lead or we create. Are we able in our organizations to create an enabling culture? Culture that coronavirus forces us to create, people working at home, having all that they require to work at home. That is enabling culture, having a computer, having enough data, and having access that is unlimited. But are we also able to create teams that build synergy? So that even if I don't see you, you work at home, there is synergy between us, how we work. And at the end, are we able to create new forms of accountability? Not being bossed or not being followed or not, but being able to account on your own as you work at home. So those are 6 things that leaders are forced to create. Also, leaders must create a responsive competence to the future, which is about not allowing what you get The Japanese culture, those who understand will remember the word kaizen, continuous improvement. That word is about constant challenging of what you have done today. We must never be satisfied of how the day has ended. We must build a better tomorrow all the time. If our organizations and our countries can do that, we create a mindset in our behavior that says, what I've done is not better than tomorrow, then I must do better. And that builds competitiveness. Secondly, we must build in people their own ability to be inspired to create their own vision. And we must also create an enabling environment to work with others, to create them to commit, to execute, to collaborate, and to be part of a corporate culture that we can model, that we can encourage. When we do that, we build what I call authentic leadership. We build what we call Ubuntu leadership. We build what we call the soul of leadership. We build what we call the spirit of leadership, because authenticity lasts longer. Authenticity cannot be corrupted. If you are authentic, you remain truthful to your principles of life. And as we do that, we build this model. It's my own model. I've put a number of models together to form these three circles. It's a model that combines a number of thought leaders I've put there below, but it's a model that says leadership is about intuition, and leadership is about self. Leadership is about seeing. Leadership is about soul. But leadership without followership, and followership, I'm not talking people who follow you. I'm talking a mindset in you as a leader of becoming also a follower. Good leaders must be followers. They must listen to people. They must involve people. They must trust people. They must understand their context and their complexity. Without trying to blow what is happening now, I would believe that the coronavirus has forced our leaders to practice followership. It has also forced them to practice intuition. It is also forcing them to practice partnerships as they partner with Professor Karim from the university, who leads these scientists around Dr. Mkize. They are practicing these three circles, but it is the coronavirus that has forced us to do that. And my hope is that we shall sustain this beyond the lockdown. And we shall become transformational leaders. And I'm not going to read in detail. We shall become the guider into the journey. And we shall be fully present. My granddaughter here is with me. I will also say transformational leaders also encourage critical reflection. All right? Transformational leaders also evoke stories. What are the stories you are building in your organization? What are the narratives you are creating in your life? Transformational leaders also map values. They don't define them, but they map a context at which values and principles emerge. But also, we must create an environment that identifies traveling styles. Just as an example, we shall never enjoy traveling by aeroplane all the time, because we can talk as we are doing. You don't need to go to Mkanyagude in order to meet a friend. You can set up a Zoom or a Skype and have a meeting. You can even meet a team. So traveling identities are changing. We must also create means to follow others. How do we do that? I'm sorry to say, Sharma, Bridges, and Nasbam are saying if we want change, something has to die first. Something has to die in me and in you. And when something dies, it gives opportunity for something new to be born. Why are we struggling today with leaders who are authoritative, who are greedy, who are positional? It's because they've not allowed themselves to die. They've not let go of their old experiences, of their old mindsets, of their old behaviors. They have not allowed themselves to be anchored into the trueness of spirituality. They have not allowed themselves to be led by relationships and reputation. They have not allowed themselves to create legacies in their lives. I like this quotation. The quality of the intervention is determined by the quality of the interior condition of the intervener. The quality of the intervention is determined by the quality of the interior condition of the intervener. Keep that in mind. If that's the case, we shall be able to build the skills that are required for the future. And look on the right-hand side, not on the left. On the right-hand side, that's where the character is built. We build it through curiosity, initiative, persistency, adaptability, leadership, and social awareness. In other words, if our country is weak on literacy, on numeracy, on science, on ICT, on financial literacy, and on culture, then we can't make character strong. We must balance these three levels, these three silos. We must build foundation, but we must also build the middle part of competencies, critical thinking, 4R, creativity. But in order to build the future, we need character and qualities of curiosity, initiatives, and persistence. Leaders must build sustainability and create organizations that last long. Leaders must create shared leadership. They must not lead alone. They must work with and through and amongst other people. For that to happen, we must build courage. We must inspire. We must allow new citizenry to emerge in our countries and in our organizations. And we must take advantage of the Africa that should rise and identify itself in the world and not become beggars constantly for grants and for support. And to do that, as I conclude, we must understand that if an egg is broken by an outside force, life ends. But if an egg is broken by an inside force, life begins. Greater things will always begin when we individually, one by one, whether you are a leader or not, when you are able to find that internal force that is built within and that drives you. As Howard Tambo once said, our fight is not yet done. And let us fight for the right to be literate, questioning, and educated. Only then we shall be able to have the will to be truly able to claim that we have won our liberty. I leave it to you